I was told straight out, they said to me, do you want to become a member of this life? And I said, yes. And they said, well, here's the deal. From now on, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, you're on call to serve this family, the Colombo family. That means if your mother is sick and she's dying and you're at her bedside and we call you to service, you leave your mother's side, you come and serve us. From now on, we're number one in your life before anything and everything. From that moment on, you have to do whatever you're told to do to prove yourself worthy. And, there was a lot of menial things. There was times I had to drive the boss to a meeting. I sat in the car 2, 3, 4 hours, waited for him to come out. God forbid you leave, you go to the restroom, go get a newspaper, he comes out, you're not there, you're in trouble. I learned to be a very good listener at that point, Jordan. I just listened and observed and seen what it was I need to do and what was expected of me. And look, again, to be honest, there are times when you're called upon within that life to commit an act of violence. And if you're told to do it, you need to do it.
And before you had gone into medical school and then decided to take this turn in your life, had you been involved in anything that was violent as a child or a teenager?
I had a fight, 2 or 3 neighborhood fights. My ribs were broken once, I got hit with a bat. Things like that, scuffles like that, but nothing major. But I witnessed things, My dad was a fairly violent guy. I saw him hit people, so I witnessed that. He had, trouble with somebody on the street. I was driving with him, and he was pretty violent with the guy.
How did you react to that when you were 11?
It kind of scared me. I didn't see him like that with another guy. So I was a little concerned. I said, hey, in my mind, I guess I was thinking, is this going to get out of hand? But it made an impression on me.
So, all right, so you how far had you got in medical school?
Well, I was a pre-med student. It was my second year. I was a sophomore. Basically a biology major.
What happened with your father? What happened with your attempts to have his case re-adjudicated?
Well, my dad actually did 40 years on that 50. He was under the old law, and after 10 years, I actually did get him out on parole, but he kept going back in, and always for associating with other felons, somebody alleged to be in organized crime. So he was paroled 5 times, violated 5 times, and went back in. He was actually released in 2017 for the last time. He was 100 years old on the date of his release. He was actually the oldest, member of that life in America, probably in the world. And he died at the age of 103, just two years ago.
At that time, what did it mean to be part of the Cosa Nostra 5 families in New York? And why 5? And how were they bonded together, or were they competing with one another?
Well, they didn't compete with one another, but there were rivalries at the time, but never rivalries that ended up in violence, because in that life there's a perception that families used to fight one another. But I always say this, Jordan, I believe the golden years, if you want to call them that, of mafia in New York, and probably throughout the United States, was really from the 50s until the mid-80s. In the mid-80s, things started to fall apart when Rudy Giuliani started to really use the racketeering laws and put a lot of guys in prison, created a lot of informants, and that's when the life kind of made a drastic turn. We had a lot of power and a lot of control in this country.
Yeah, well, it said in your bio that you, at the height of your activity, you were involved in criminal activity that was generating something between $5 and $8 million a week, and that would be in the 70s, if I've got the timeline correct.
Yes.
So that's an awful lot of money. What sort of activities were you overseeing, and what did that overseeing consist of?
There was kind of 2 types of people in that life. You were either a racketeer or a gangster. I put out money on the street at usurious rates. People couldn't go to a bank, so they would come to me. I was very aggressive on the street. I worked very hard, and a lot of people would come to me with different schemes. There's a misconception that guys in that life sit in their social clubs and look at the next business that they're going to attack or infiltrate or corrupt in some way. It's someone from the business that would come to us and say, hey, we have a scheme to defraud our company or our business, can you help us? And that happened to me quite often. And the biggest thing, to answer your question that I got involved in was I was involved in a scheme to defraud the government out of tax on every gallon of gasoline.
How was that implemented, that scam on the gasoline tax front?
Well, initially in New York, and I think throughout the country, the tax on every gallon was collected at the gas station. While that was happening, we had 350 or so gas stations that we either owned or operated, and we installed people in all of them. And to make a long story short, it would take the government about 10 months before they would come down on a company that wasn't paying tax.
So how come the government didn't clue in if they were losing the amount of money that you were siphoning off? You said you ran this repeatedly, so if I've got it right, you set up a company, you had about 11-month window before the government would come in and enforce its tax collection. So you could collect money for 10 months and then just kill the company and then start another one.
Correct.
And so, and then you managed to do that for 8 years.
Yes.
So why didn't the government clue in?
Well, they couldn't. They were investigating us. They were trying to clue in. They just couldn't figure out how we were doing it or what we were doing. And, it was a pretty sophisticated operation, and we just tried to stay one step ahead of them, which we were able to do.